Hello, all. I want to welcome you to my new show. My name is Rob Jenkins, and I'm the host of the Scoreboard podcast. On the Scoreboard podcast, we're going to talk about all things sports gaming. That can be fantasy sports, sports betting, sports video games, and much more. Like something that I know you're all thinking about right now, your March Madness bracket. So for this first episode, we're going to go through my March Madness bracket, and I'm going to tell you some bets that I'm going to be making for March Madness based on my bracket. So let's get right into it. Let's go over my March Madness bracket. So for this first game, we're not going to think too much. UConn's been one of the best teams in the country. They are going to topple on a 16 seed Stetson. For FAU versus Northwestern, I'm going to take Northwestern here. These teams are very similar in adjusted offense and defensive metrics. I'm going to take Northwestern and hope that the Big Ten has prepared them for the tournament run. For San Diego State versus UAB, I'm taking San Diego State. I don't think that UAB has enough offense to get past such a stifling defense. For the Auburn versus Yale game, I'm going to take Auburn to beat Yale. Auburn has been clicking on all cylinders during that SEC tournament. They have a great offense, great defense. Let's lock them in. BYU, they're one of the best shooting teams in the country right now. I'm going to take them to beat Duquesne, who scored 45 points against someone, I believe. I just can't trust that. Illinois is too much to handle for Moorhead. For our first major upset of the tournament, I'm going to take Drake to beat Washington State. I think that Drake team just has a lot in them. And Washington State is one team that's just limping into the playoffs. We're also going to take Iowa State to beat South Dakota. I think this is a very good defensive team. Heading down to the West. As you can see, I'm just doing this right on the ESPN website. We're going to do North Carolina over Wagner. I don't think there's going to be in any 16 seats. The upset of one this year. There's a very strong group here. Moving on to Michigan State versus Mississippi State. I can't go against Tom Izzo in the first round of an NCAA tournament. That's just something that I'm always going to stick beside. So I'm going to take Michigan State. St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon. We're going to take St. Mary's here. They've been one of the best teams in the country, beating a Gonzaga team 2 out of 1 times. This is a really good team. Alabama versus Charleston. We've seen some struggles for Alabama, but I don't think Charleston has enough. I'm going to take Alabama. Clemson versus New Mexico. New Mexico is a big sleeper in this tournament for me. I'm going to take New Mexico to win this game. Baylor versus Colgate. I think Baylor gets by Colgate. Colgate has just been beating up on bad teams in their conference. And those bad teams are getting even more closer as they play them. So I'm going to take Baylor. I'm going to take Nevada over Dayton. Arizona versus Long Beach State. Arizona is one of those teams that haunt me every year, but I'm going to take them to get past this 15 seed. Now let's head over to our South and Midwest side of the bracket for round 1. Starting off with Houston versus Longwood. I'm going to take Houston to beat Longwood. Then we're going to go to Nebraska versus Texas A&M. We are taking Nebraska in this matchup. Nebraska is the better team by Ken Palm's rankings, so that's where I'm going to lead. Then we got Wisconsin versus JMU. I'm taking JMU in this game to upset Wisconsin. This is a team that is very hot right now, winning 13 straight. Then we're going to take Duke over Vermont. Duke has been playing bad of late. They've lost 2 games. But I think Vermont is the exact team they need to face to get on a hot run. For the Texas Tech and NC State game, we're going to take NC State to upset Texas Tech. I think this is one of the teams that are getting hot at the right time. It looks like they started off the season well, and they want to end it well. Then we're going to take Kentucky to beat Oakland. Florida versus the winner of either Boise State or Colorado, I believe. Either way, we're taking Florida. And Marquette versus Western Kentucky. We're going to take Marquette to win this game. Western Kentucky has no chance of upsetting Marquette, in my opinion. They want to play the same game as Marquette, and Marquette is better at playing up-tempo game than anybody in the country. Moving down to the Midwest, we're going to take Purdue. Zach Edey gets them past the first round. Then I'm going to take TCU to beat Utah State. I think TCU has a very all-around team and much better athletes than Utah State. We're going to take Gonzaga to beat McNeese. Gonzaga's playing really good right now. They lost that game to St. Mary's, but it was really close. For the Kansas versus Samford game, I'm going to take Samford to upset Kansas. I don't think this is the Kansas of years past. They're on upset alert. South Carolina versus Oregon. We're going to take Oregon to win that game. They have very similar teams. This is very much of a toss-up here. Creighton versus Akron. We're going to take Creighton to win that game. Creighton's a great team that wants to play a slow pace. Akron doesn't have the athletes to speed them up. I'm going to take Creighton. We're going to take Texas to beat Colorado State. I love this Texas program. Ever since that new coach took over 2 years ago, back-to-back NCAA berths, get them into the second round. And then we're going to take Tennessee to beat St. Peter's. There will be no Cinderella story for St. Peter's this year. Right into the second round of the NCAA tournament, starting off with Texas versus Tennessee. I'm going to take Tennessee to beat Texas. I think Tennessee's star big gets them a little further than teams that don't have one. And then we're going to take Creighton to beat Oregon. I'm not too heavy on the Pac-12 this year. Following it up with Gonzaga to beat Samford. Samford is when your Cinderella run ends. They did a good job taking care of Kansas, but no more. And we're going to take Purdue to beat TCU. I just think Zach Leddy doesn't let this team down. They move on to at least the Sweet 16. And for the South, we're going to take Marquette versus Florida. We're going to take Florida in this game. I don't like Marquette. I think if someone can slow them down, they'll have some troubles. And then we're going to take Kentucky to beat NC State. John Calipari, this is your year. He has a loaded team. Moving on to James Madison versus Duke. We are going to take Duke to win this game. And we're going to take Houston to get past Nebraska. Houston's still one of the best teams in the country. Moving back over to the East, we got UConn versus Northwestern. I'm going to take UConn to beat Northwestern. That UConn team's defense is going to smother them. And then for San Diego State versus Auburn, we're going to take Auburn. I think Auburn has just enough offense to get past San Diego State, and Auburn's defense will already be crushing a very mediocre San Diego State offense. And then we're going to take BYU to beat Illinois. I love three-point shooting teams to make upsets this time of year. And then we're going to take Iowa State to beat Drake. Iowa State is one of those serious contenders of this tournament. Out west, we're going to take North Carolina to beat Michigan State. Tom Izzo is going to work too many miracles this tournament. And then we're going to take St. Mary's to beat Alabama. One and done for Alabama after a struggling season. Then we're going to take New Mexico to move into the Sweet 16. That's your first double-digit team in the Sweet 16. I love this team. And then we're going to take Arizona to beat Nevada. Moving on to our Sweet 16 matchups. We got North Carolina versus St. Mary's. That North Carolina team is hella experienced. Outside of losing Caleb Love to Arizona, they're bringing back so many guys that they have from that long run 3 years ago. I'm going to take North Carolina to get to the Elite Eight. And then we're going to take New Mexico to continue their run onto the Elite Eight. I do not trust Arizona, even with the pickup of Caleb Love. And for the other side of the bracket, we're going to take Gonzaga to beat Purdue. I love how Gonzaga's playing, and I don't trust Zach Edey against top competition. In our other Elite Eight team, Creighton versus Tennessee, we're going to take Tennessee to move on to that Elite Eight. For our remaining Sweet 16 games, we're starting off with UConn versus Auburn. I'm going to take Auburn to upset UConn. I just think there's too hard to go, 5 games, back-to-back years. It's just very hard to win back-to-back NCAA titles. I'm going to take Auburn to upset UConn. And then we're going to take Iowa State to beat BYU. Iowa State's going to bring defense to a team that is heavily reliant on their offense, and BYU, they move on. And then we're going to take Houston to beat Duke. Duke will have the benefit of playing a couple bad teams in the tournament to get to the Sweet 16 before facing Houston, who completely obliterates them. And then we're going to take Kentucky to beat Florida and move on to the Elite Eight. From here, we're looking at a Final Four, 2 Final Four spots up for grabs. We got Auburn versus Iowa State. I'm going to take Auburn to get into the Final Four. This is a team that got hot in the SEC tournament. They get hot in the March Madness, and they make it to the Final Four. And the team that has been the best team, in my opinion, all college season, Houston, is going to beat Kentucky to get to that Final Four. North Carolina versus New Mexico. I'm going to take North Carolina. Elite Eight, these are when the Blue Bloods show out and do their thing. And if I can click. And for Gonzaga versus Tennessee, we're going to take Tennessee to get to that Final Four. With a Final Four of Auburn versus North Carolina and Houston versus Tennessee. My championship game will be North Carolina versus Houston, and I think Houston takes the national championship. Lock in these picks, guys. So now you've went through the bracket, you've picked all your picks, and we're just moving on to putting in our sports bet for March Madness, going through all 64 games in that first round, and creating a system. The system that I personally like to use while betting Sports Madness that's been profitable for me, don't have exact data on it, I'm sorry, but here's what I do. Anytime that I pick an underdog matchup for the tourney, I'm going to bet the money line plus the spread on that play. So, for example, one of my picks was Sanford over Kansas as the 12-4. So I'm going to bet on Sanford to win that game on the money line. It's going to be plus money. I think out of a plus 245 or something like that. And I'm also going to place another bet on Sanford to cover the spread. I like to sell a point or two so I can get a plus 105 or plus 110, just so if the spread hits, I do walk away with something in case the spread hits and the money line doesn't. Another way to combat that and kind of hedge your losses there is to do like 60% or like as zero point 0.6 of a unit on the money line, and then I'm sorry, zero point 0.6 of a unit on the spread, and then zero point 0.4 on the money line. That way that you know you're walking away with cash for those spread wins. And for the favorites, I'm moving away from all spread bets for the favorites on March Madness. I think it's just about getting through. Those teams aren't really worrying about score. There's no style points like in college football. So for any game for a favorite, I'm going to take them straight up on the money line for any line minus 200. Once we start getting above minus 200, that's when I'm going to look to put a couple teams together in a parlay, 3 or 4 legs to try to get to that plus money territory for my parlay.